Okay, this is the tutorial for our reading exercise. As before, we write our student's proficiency level under student proficiency level. Then we write our original reading activity below. Remember that some of you may not have reading included in your original lesson plan. Well, here's your opportunity to create a reading exercise within the framework of your original lesson plan. Okay? So this is where you're going to write your original activity reading activity that you have. If you do not have an original reading activity or exercise within your original lesson plan, then you develop one. You think, okay, how do I read in math? Well, I read the textbook. I read the equations. Come up with something very basic. A good suggestion here is to look at the can-do descriptors and work your way backwards. Okay, if this is what they can do for reading, well, what kinds of reading can I implement in my modified exercise? So that being said here, we write, of course, like we have before, the teacher role and the student role. This particular exercise is very teacher heavy and teacher directed. There's a lot of websites that the student has to read. The teacher has to give step-by-step instructions on how to use the iPads and yada yada yada. So that being said, some of the things that we need to take into consideration, given that Paulo is a beginning level reader in English, is how do we use or integrate the can-do descriptors more efficiently for that particular student within the framework of this activity or exercise. So we go to our can-do descriptors. This child, or this particular ELL student, can identify facts and explicit messages from illustrated text, find changes to root words in context. Root words mean, for example, you have comprehensible input. The root word for comprehensible input is comprehend. Identify the elements of story or grammar, character, setting, and whatnot. Follow visually supported written directions. Draw a star in the sky. Okay, this is what they can do for reading. All right, so let's go back to that original activity. Okay, and essentially we want to look at this and go, Students will answer with short phrases to explain what was read. Responses should consist of blah blah blah. Students, let's say, students will continue to follow the reading. Not quite what we need to work on here, but what we could do is integrate. Students will identify facts and explicit messages from illustrated text. All right. So here, students will students will identify specific messages from illustrated text. Okay. Of course, she's combining listening with reading. And so that being said, responses to the question may be read from the section. Okay, she's having them do this a lot on the iPads and the websites. We can't assume that just because it's on a website that the student can read it effectively. Okay. Something here that a teacher can do to facilitate reading this particular website is to have a list of questions already provided. Okay. This means that the teacher will have to really read through the website first that she's asking him or her to use. All right. Okay. Another thing here will be, for example, identify elements of story grammar. This is not necessarily what they're doing here with respect to art, but identify elements of the forms of government. Identify elements of solving equations. Identify elements of earth, space, and physical science. Okay? What kinds of elements can they identify through reading? Well, here, all right, students will follow the teacher's instructions and point to different images as asked. Okay, that's all right. Now, students will, again, coming back to here, identify elements. Okay. Okay. Students let me put this in a different place. Okay, students will identify elements of Matisse's artwork based on their reading and interpretation or listening. Okay, and then finally, people forget that students have a lot of instructions to read. So perhaps then classroom teacher can say, students will follow and read visually supported instructions for completing the Matisse-inspired artwork and work on the project on their iPad. Okay? And there you go. You have a simple reading, integration of reading within your lesson plan. Thank you. And have a good evening.